My name is Eleanor Drake, and I am 62 years old. For most of my adult life, I have believed that quiet preparation is a form of love. I grew up watching my mother stretch every dollar with dignity, never out of fear but out of intention. Because of her, I learned to save not for emergencies alone, but for the kind of life where my future self would feel held, protected, and unburdened. When I married my husband, Philip, 22 years ago, he used to say that my thriftiness made me a calming force. Back then, he admired it. He said it created a safety net around our marriage. He worked in sales, and his income rose and dipped like a restless tide, but mine, steady work as a librarian, was the quiet anchor. But the years softened him in strange ways. After he received a midlife promotion, his spending grew bolder and his appreciation for boundaries thinner. Marching into a store and leaving with something unnecessary became a kind of sport for him. I didn't scold him. I simply continued saving the way I always had. Our home, a modest two-story with a sloping backyard, had always been peaceful. We gardened together on weekends, though he preferred buying seedlings while I saved seeds from one season to the next. We were different, yes, but complementary, or so I believed. Then last spring, I noticed a shift. Philip started making jokes about my frugality. Not light-hearted ones, but ones with a thread of irritation woven through. If I washed and reused glass jars, he'd comment that I was one step away from living like a pioneer woman. If I pointed out that we didn't need another kitchen gadget, he'd respond that I never wanted to enjoy life. The comments didn't hurt at first, but they hardened over time, like sediment collecting at the bottom of a river. I sensed something brewing beneath the surface. Something that would soon show me exactly how deep the cracks had become. The foreshadowing arrived on a warm Saturday afternoon, in the form of a casual remark that lingered far longer than it should have. Philip had been scrolling through his phone and suddenly muttered, "My parents might need some financial help. They made a few risky decisions. Do they need anything now?" I asked. "No, not yet," he said. "But it might be time for you to loosen the purse strings. You save too much anyway." I remember blinking, unsure how to respond. He'd never used that tone before, entitled, expectant, as though my savings were a community fund waiting to be accessed. A small chill passed through me. Not fear exactly, but a quiet awareness. Something was coming. Something that would force me to rethink everything I thought I knew about marriage, loyalty, and the silent labor of planning for the future. I didn't know then that within weeks, the word cheap would be hurled at me in a moment so sharp I would remember the echo for days. And I didn't know that the real storm wasn't Philip at all. It was his parents, and the $12,000 they would soon demand. And demand it from me. The phone call that ignites everything is about to arrive. The call came on a Tuesday morning, just after I'd brewed my second cup of tea. Philip's parents, Linda and Charles, were not the warmest people, but they were predictable. They called on holidays, occasionally on birthdays, and never, absolutely never, on weekday mornings. I answered assuming it would be some simple question about insurance or appointments. But the first thing I heard was heavy breathing and whispered arguing. Then Linda's voice broke through. "Eleanor, dear, we need to speak with you. With you specifically. Not you both. Not you and Philip. Just me." I felt the first tug of dread. "Of course," I said gently. "Is everything all right?" "No," she snapped, as though the world itself had offended her. "We're in a situation. A financial one. And we were hoping," her voice softened into a manufactured sweetness, "that you could help us." I inhaled slowly. What kind of help? That was when she said it. Straight, unapologetically, as if asking for a cup of flour. "We need $12,000. Immediately." My heartbeat stuttered. I nearly dropped my tea. I'm sorry, Linda. That's a significant amount. What's happened?" Before she could answer, I heard Philip come down the stairs. His eyes were bleary, but when he saw the phone pressed to my ear, he perked up. He mouthed, "Is that Mom?" I nodded. Linda suddenly grew louder, as if performing. "We were going to call Philip," she said, "but we know how he gets anxious about these things. And you're the one who handles money responsibly. So we thought." Her sentence drifted off, but the implication landed hard. They were bypassing their own son, coming straight to me, because I was the saver. "Can you help us, Eleanor?" she asked. "We know you always have something tucked away." Philip snatched the phone from my hand before I could respond. "Mom, why would you call her about this?" he snapped. But instead of defending me, he marched into the kitchen and lowered his voice. I couldn't hear the words, only the tone. Frustrated, urgent, defensive. A few minutes later, he returned and handed the phone back. "They're going to call us later," he said stiffly. "It's complicated." Then came the moment. The betrayal wrapped in irritation, delivered so casually it almost didn't register at first. "You could have just agreed to help them," he muttered. "You save all this money and never use it. What's the point of hoarding if not for family? You're always so cheap about everything." Cheap. The word landed like a slap. A word he had never used before. A word I knew had been brewing in him for months, maybe longer. I looked at him. Really looked. The man I'd shared a life with, meals with, a bed with, now staring at me with something that resembled resentment. My voice was calm. "Did you just call me cheap?" He scoffed. "If the shoe fits, Eleanor." Something inside me tightened, not anger, but clarity. Cold, precise clarity. This wasn't about money. This was about entitlement. And secrets. And I suddenly understood, if I didn't uncover the truth behind this $12,000 emergency, I would lose more than savings. I would lose myself. I begin digging into what his parents, and Philip, aren't telling me. Growing up, I learned that financial silence can hide a multitude of sins. My mother used to say, "Money reveals character faster than tragedy." I never fully understood that until adulthood, and certainly not until I married into Philip's family. When I first met his parents, Linda had looked me up and down with a saleswoman's assessment, deciding in seconds whether I fit into the Drake mold. I remember her commenting on my practical shoes, a euphemism for not expensive enough, with a polite smile that didn't reach her eyes. Charles, quieter but not kinder, treated money as a means of control. He dangled gifts, then used them like strings. Philip grew up believing that financial generosity always came with hidden expectations. It was no surprise he became a man who spent impulsively. Money had never been modeled as something to manage, only something to flaunt. Still, I loved him. He had charm, ambition, and moments of profound vulnerability. And he loved that I brought stability to his life. But somewhere along the years, admiration began to warp into dependence, and dependence into expectation, and expectation into entitlement. As I sat alone that afternoon, replaying the word cheap in my mind, I felt the old memories resurfacing. Moments I had brushed aside, now suddenly illuminated. The time Philip forgot to mention he'd lent his parents $3,000 from our joint account. The time Linda asked me, during Thanksgiving dinner, how much I made in a year, as if assessing her chances of future financial support. The time Charles suggested we combine all family savings into a single shared fund. I'd always declined gracefully, always gently reinforced boundaries. But boundaries only work when others respect them. I realized then that Philip's resentment wasn't spontaneous. It was cultivated. And the seeds had been planted long ago by a family who saw money not as a resource, but as leverage. Still, I needed more than memories. I needed truth. So I went to the filing cabinet in my home office. Philip rarely touched it. He hated paperwork. But I kept careful records, taxes, insurance, bank statements, investment accounts, everything neatly organized. As I sifted through our recent statements, something caught my eye. Several withdrawals from a separate savings account Philip had insisted on opening for vacations. Only I never used that card. I didn't even know the PIN. 3 withdrawals. Each over $2,000. All within the last 6 months. My stomach dropped. This wasn't about me being cheap. This was about someone else being reckless. And now they wanted to use my savings to patch their mistakes. The truth whispered to me from the edges of those statements. There was more. Far more. But I needed proof. I closed the drawer gently, sat back in my chair, and felt a quiet resolve settle in my bones. I wasn't going to confront Philip yet. I would give him the courtesy of truth born from evidence, not assumptions. But I knew one thing already. This $12,000 request wasn't random. It was the final symptom of a sickness that had been growing out of sight. And I was ready to diagnose it. I begin investigating Philip's financial activity, and what I find will shake the foundation of our marriage. I began with the simplest step, gathering the facts. Facts have a way of cutting through emotional fog. And I needed clarity more than comfort. The first thing I did was check our joint account more thoroughly. While Philip had always been careless with receipts, the digital trail told a sharper story. Out-of-state restaurant charges. Purchases at high-end stores he'd never mentioned. Cash withdrawals marked at ATMs near his parents' home. That alone raised questions. But what troubled me more were the recurring payments to an unfamiliar institution. A consultation service, with a name that sounded both vague and suspicious. I called the number listed. A polite but clipped voice answered. Evergreen Advisory, how may I assist you? I kept my tone crisp, professional. I'm calling about charges made from our joint account. I'd like to know what services you provide. We assist clients who are managing debt settlements, the representative said. Financial restructuring, negotiation, repayment strategies. Debt settlements. My heart thudded. Not ours. His parents. I thanked the representative and hung up, feeling the room tilt slightly. Debt meant something far deeper than a temporary setback. It meant instability, mismanagement, perhaps even desperation. Philip hadn't told me any of it. Instead, he'd let resentment fester toward me, because I wasn't handing him or his parents a soft landing. Even so, I needed more. So I sat at my computer and logged into our credit reports, something I checked annually. And there it was, a recent inquiry tied to a loan application. Not under my name. Under his. A loan he hadn't mentioned. For almost the exact amount his parents now claimed to need. $12,000. The picture was becoming clearer, though far uglier than I had feared. But I wasn't finished. I needed to understand the source of the urgency. Why 12,000? Why now? So I did something I rarely did. I reached out directly to his sister Marianne. She and I had always remained cordial but distant. Still, she had a practical streak that made her easier to talk to than her parents. When she picked up, I said, Marianne, I need to ask you something. Has anything happened with your parents recently? Something serious. There was a long, telling pause. Then a sigh. So they finally dragged you into it. Dragged. The word hit like a cold splash of water. What is it? I asked calmly. They invested in a business scheme, she said. Some fraudulent real estate pitch. They put in money they didn't have. A lot of it. They've been scrambling to cover the losses. How much? More than they'll admit out loud. Does Philip know? Another pause. Yes. He knows. My breath stilled. Has he helped them financially? Yes, she said quietly. Several times. He just didn't want to tell you. The silence that followed felt heavy, suffocating. He knew. And he'd kept me blind. And now he had the audacity to call me cheap. I thanked her, ended the call, and sat for a long moment with the truth. Philip wasn't just financially reckless. He was hiding things. Big things. And now his parents were trying to use me as the final solution. The evidence was there. All that remained was the next step, gathering it in one place, so the truth would be incontrovertible. And then, the confrontation. I prepare the evidence and wait for the inevitable moment when Philip asks again. This time, I'll be ready. The next few days felt strangely calm. Calm in the way the air settles before a storm makes landfall. Philip tiptoed around me, perhaps sensing the quiet chill in my demeanor. I wasn't cold, exactly. I was focused. Every piece of evidence I found, I documented. Screenshots, statements, payment records, withdrawals. A timeline began to form, stark and undeniable. The truth had weight now, and that weight was no longer mine to carry alone. On Thursday evening, the moment arrived. Philip came into my office, his expression somewhere between guilty and hopeful. Mom and Dad called again, he said. They really need help. Can't we just offer something? I met his gaze steadily. They need $12,000. And they need it now. Why? He stiffened. I told you. They're struggling. Struggling, I repeated softly. Is that what we're calling it? He looked confused, and then defensive. Eleanor, don't start. They're family. You're always so unwilling to. I raised a hand gently. No accusations. Not yet. Just truth. He blinked. What do you mean? I turned my monitor toward him and clicked open the folder labeled Drake Finances, Evidence. Every document, every screenshot, every discrepancy was there. At first he frowned. Then his eyes widened in dawning panic. What is all this? He asked. Your withdrawals, I said calmly. Your payments to Evergreen Advisory. The records of your parents' debts. The loan inquiry. And the timeline. He stepped back as if the truth itself had physical force. I can explain. This folder, I said quietly, is every financial secret you've kept from me in the last 6 months. He swallowed hard. I didn't tell you because you always worry. No. You didn't tell me because you knew I would say no. You knew I would insist on boundaries. And you chose secrecy over partnership. He ran a hand through his hair. My parents are drowning, Eleanor. They made a bad investment. I didn't want to burden you by lying. He froze. I continued. You took money from the joint savings. You supported their debt while letting resentment grow toward me for not chipping in. You let them believe they could come to me directly. His voice cracked. I was trying to protect them. And who was protecting me? I asked. He didn't answer. I leaned back in my chair. Philip, I need to know something. How much have you given them? He hesitated. Too long. Finally, 10,000. Maybe 11. I didn't keep track. The betrayal tightened around me like a slow-moving tide. You used our joint money without telling me, I said softly. And now they want 12,000 more. He sank into the chair across from me, defeated. I didn't want you to think less of them. I don't think less of them, I said. I think less of secrecy. And manipulation. He looked up sharply. Manipulation. Yes, I said. Because that's exactly what happened. And it ends now. The truth wasn't just unfolding. It was reshaping the entire foundation of our marriage. And the next step would determine everything. The confrontation with Philip and his parents is coming, and I will lead it. The confrontation took place on a quiet Sunday afternoon. Philip's parents had insisted on coming over to talk this out properly. I agreed, not out of obligation, but out of necessity. When they arrived, Linda's expression carried the kind of desperation that had hardened into entitlement. Charles looked defensive before a word was spoken. Philip stood near the window, hands fidgeting. I remained composed. Calm. Grounded. Eleanor, Linda said immediately, we hope you've reconsidered. We really need your help. I understand, I said evenly. And I'm willing to talk. But first, we need transparency. Charles scoffed. We don't owe you an explanation. You do, I said gently. If you're asking for $12,000 of my personal savings, you owe me honesty. The room went still. I placed the folder of printed documents on the table. Before we continue, I want to make sure we're all operating from truth. I know about the investment scheme, the debt counseling, the previous support Philip has already provided. I know about the loan application. And I know the true extent of what you owe. Linda's face drained of color. Charles's jaw tightened. Philip closed his eyes, bracing. You went into debt, I continued. Significant debt. And instead of telling me, you approached me under false pretenses. You asked me to hand over money without context. Without trust. Linda sputtered. We were embarrassed. I understand embarrassment, I said. But embarrassment is not an excuse for deception. Charles leaned forward, glowering. We're family. Family helps each other. Family also respects boundaries, I replied. Linda threw her hands up. We thought you, of all people, would understand. You're always so careful with money. Careful, I said quietly, does not mean obligated. Silence again. Thick. Uncomfortable. Necessary. Then Philip stepped in. His voice trembled. Mom. Dad. This isn't fair to Eleanor. I should have been honest. I shouldn't have taken money without telling her. Linda rounded on him. We raised you better than to let your wife dictate what you can do. Philip flinched. She's not dictating. She's asking for honesty. Charles barked. She's hoarding money while we suffer. I looked at him calmly. No. I am managing my future. You are asking me to fund your past mistakes. Linda's eyes brimmed with angry tears. We just need help. And I'm offering you something better than money, I said. They paused. Confused. I continued. I'm offering a plan. One that doesn't require draining the savings I've built over decades. One that holds everyone accountable. Charles crossed his arms. What plan? I laid out the options. Debt restructuring with a reputable advisor. Selling an RV they rarely used. Downsizing their storage unit. Eliminating luxury subscriptions. Using Philip support only with documented agreements. As I spoke, I saw it clearly, the mixture of shock, resistance, and reluctant understanding. I am not giving you $12,000, I said. But I am giving you a path forward. Charles stood abruptly. This is an insult. No, I said gently, rising to meet his stare. This is boundaries. Linda's fury softened into something else. Humiliation, perhaps. Or realization. Philip looked from them to me, speechless. And then, slowly, the room began to settle. No yelling. No chaos. Just truth. Truth that had been waiting far too long to be spoken aloud. The consequences of this confrontation will ripple through all of us, and the fallout begins immediately. The fallout began before the front door even closed. Philip stood in the living room, shoulders slumped, staring at the floor as though the truth had taken something from him. In a way, it had. But sometimes truth breaks only to rebuild. He finally spoke. I'm sorry, Eleanor. I should have trusted you. I was scared. Scared of what? I asked softly. That you'd see my parents differently, he whispered. And see me differently too. I stepped closer. I don't see you as weak. I see you as someone who was trying to protect everyone at once, and ended up hurting the person who loved him the most. His eyes filled. He nodded. The next few weeks unfolded slowly. His parents were distant at first, embarrassed and defensive. But eventually, they agreed to the financial plan I had outlined. Not because they wanted to, but because reality demanded it. They sold the RV, closed the storage unit, entered a structured, legitimate debt repayment program. It wasn't easy for them, but it was honest. And for the first time, They stopped asking for money that wasn't theirs. As for Philip and me, healing came in layers. He began attending financial counseling with me, learning the skills he had never been taught. We rebuilt our budgeting together. He apologized without excuses, without defensiveness. One evening, as we were reviewing our accounts, he said, "I want to earn back your trust the way you earned your savings, slowly, intentionally, with purpose." It wasn't poetic. It was real. And real is what a marriage needs. In that same span of time, I found myself reflecting on my own patterns. Not the saving. I stood by that proudly, but the way I had often carried the burden alone. Saving quietly. Planning quietly. Protecting quietly. Maybe it was time for partnership to be truly shared, not merely assumed. By the end of summer, our finances were stable again. Balanced. Transparent. The resentment that once lingered in Philip's eyes was gone, replaced by humility and gratitude. And his parents, once furious at me, surprised me one afternoon by sending a short note. Not warm. Not emotional. But honest. "Thank you for helping us without enabling us." I read it twice. Then tucked it away, not as validation, but as closure. Because the real consequence of everything wasn't the money saved or the boundaries set. It was this. We had rewritten the rules of our relationships. All of them. And the person I became through it, the calm, grounded woman who confronted truth without cruelty, felt like someone my mother would have been proud of. Now comes the quiet reflection, the part where healing transforms into wisdom. In the months that followed, life returned to its ordinary rhythm, but something inside me had changed. I felt steadier. Not harder, not colder, just clearer. Clarity can be gentle, if you let it. One evening, while watering my herbs on the back porch, I found myself thinking about the word, cheap. The insult that once felt so sharp now seemed almost laughably small compared to the truth it had exposed. I wasn't cheap. I was prepared. I was thoughtful. I was intentional with my life. And in the end, it was that intention, the quiet discipline of a lifetime, that protected us all. Philip joined me on the porch. He sat beside me, reached for my hand, and said, "You saved us, Eleanor. Not with money. With honesty." I didn't answer right away. I let the evening breeze settle around us, carrying the scent of rosemary and earth. At last I said, "Honesty saves more than money ever could." He nodded, understanding more deeply than he ever had before. I've learned many things in my 62 years, but this experience carved a new truth into me. Setting boundaries is not an act of selfishness. It is an act of love, love for yourself, and love for the people who rely on you to stay grounded. If I had handed over those $12,000 without question, it would not have saved anyone. It would have prolonged the problem, enabled the pattern, silenced the truth. Instead, by choosing clarity over comfort, and boundaries over resentment, I gave everyone a chance to grow. And I grew too. To anyone listening, to anyone who has been shamed for saving, mocked for caution, or criticized for having foresight, know this: you are not cheap. You are steady. And steady people hold the world together far more than loud spenders ever will. Thank you for spending this time with me. And if this story resonated with you, if it reminded you of your own boundaries, your own challenges, or your own quiet strength, I'd love to hear your thoughts. What would you have done in my place? Your stories matter. Share them.